Immunisation is one of the greatest advances in health and wellbeing. Millions of lives are saved each year. Smallpox has disappeared and polio may be abolished too. And life-threatening conditions like meningitis are also much rarer. New vaccines are emerging all the time, and sometimes, as with the recent flu vaccine, controversy emerges with them, with concerns around just how safe these vaccines are. So I spoke to an Australian expert, Professor Terry Nolan of the University of Melbourne.
Vaccination is probably the most cost-effective and potent public health intervention that we know.
So what are the types of immunisation that people should be having these days?
There are many, and they're specified on the National Immunisation Schedule for the funded program that the government offers, ranging from diseases for which we've had vaccines for 50 years, like polio or tetanus, through to newer diseases that we can now control, like cervical cancer even, meningococcal disease and so on.
Hi Kathy, hi Brittany, do you want to lay on the bed, Brittany?
With the HPV virus and the cervical cancer immunisation, we're currently immunising females. Why
Yes.
aren't we immunising males?
There is a debate still continuing about whether publicly funded programs to immunise boys should or should not happen. We now know from recent evidence that the vaccine does prevent cancer in young men, and we also know that it can reduce the circulation of the virus to protect girls who've not been immunised. So the debate is around whether it's cost effective to do that.
And has there been consideration of the increasing incidence of oral cancers associated with HPV?
Cancers of the tongue are caused both by tobacco and alcohol and also by the human papillomavirus. Those that are caused by the human papillomavirus have been increasing in frequency since the 1960s, whereas those that are caused by tobacco and alcohol have actually been declining as we've been able to reduce population levels of exposure to tobacco in particular. It is a concern that that increase is occurring, and fortunately the vaccine should prevent those cancers as well, provided individuals are vaccinated before they're exposed to the virus.
And what about the fact that there are so many types of HPV virus, but that the vaccine only covers between 2 and 6 of those?
The current vaccine only covers 2 of the oncogenic or cancer-causing genotypes or strains of the virus that cause cancer, but they're responsible for about 80% of all of the cervical cancers that occur in women and an even higher proportion of the cancers that occur in males. Then there are newer versions of the vaccines against HPV which are currently in advanced clinical trials which will cover more strains of the virus, and so we'll get higher proportions of protection.
We often hear stories about side effects with vaccines. How safe are they?
There are always risks associated with medical interventions, and vaccines are no exception. So vaccines do have risks of mostly minor unpleasant health effects, including fever and soreness and so forth, and very rarely other more serious complications that can occur.
What would you say to a mother who's deciding whether or not to have their child vaccinated about the individual risk versus the public benefit?
It's very easy for me to understand how it is that a parent will look at their brand new baby and think that, why is it that I'm exposing my baby to this potential unpleasant side effect, or maybe even the risk of a rare serious side effect for a vaccine. But when you're doing that, you know that the risk-benefit, if you like, of the risk that you're exposing them to by allowing them to be immunised against the benefit of their protection against something much worse, the consequences of the disease that you're vaccinating them against, is worthwhile.
Thanks.
What happened with the recent flu vaccine? What was the story behind that?
The flu vaccine made by one manufacturer, CSL, proved, when it was combined with the new pandemic strain, to produce a high level of fever in young children, particularly under the age of 3. And that fever was then associated with a higher risk of some of those children having a febrile convulsion. It was not all flu vaccines, it was just one manufacturer's vaccine. It was not an impurity or any imperfection in the vaccine. It was some interaction between the new pandemic strain in the way in which it was reconstituted with the other strains in that vaccine. The exact reason is still being worked out. Those febrile convulsions in those children were significant adverse reactions which caused great distress to the parents, but it was a wake-up call for us in understanding that unexpected things can occur, not because of imperfections in manufacture or lack of quality control, but for biologic reasons that we may not expect.
And has that, the one that was problematic, now been withdrawn?
The use of the CSL vaccine, which caused the febrile convulsions in young children, mostly under the age of 3, has now been restricted. So the company itself has withdrawn it for its indication for the use in children under 5. The government now recommends that it preferably not be used in 5 to 9-year-olds as well, when an alternative vaccine is available.
So if you're a mother and you've had a child immunised and they're starting to get some symptoms that you're concerned about, who is it you report those symptoms to?
The reporting of side effects which are unusual or unexpected, such as the flu vaccine, febrile convulsions with one manufacturer's vaccine, it's very important that they are notified quickly so that we can quickly understand what's going on and, if necessary, withdraw a product or modify it or whatever might be necessary to happen. But the first priority is the health of the child or the adult, if it's an adult who's been immunised, and seeking appropriate medical care immediately is the right thing to do.